What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. Well, I've been working on various projects, but the thing that's consumed most of my attention since last time we spoke has been the multi-bingo. I am prepping it for heading to TPF, Texas Pinball Festival, March 22nd through 24th in Frisco, Texas. So, what do I have left to do on this? I had mentioned previously that there pretty much wasn't anything left to do. Well, there were a couple things. So the first was I changed the menu system so that instead of it taking approximately 30 seconds to go back to the menu after you've played a game, now it goes back in under 1 second. Pretty happy with that. And here's what was lost in that change. So I was tracking the position of every unit within every game every time that it went back to the menu. So if you, for example, left Carnival Queen, the game would remember the position of the magic screen. It would remember the replays that were on the register and so forth. And you could go back to it and it would pick back up from that position. Now, portions of that were not coded in. For example, the replays were not set to carry over from game to game, because one of the things that I found was that it gave you a bit of an unfair advantage on some games which are much, much harder than other games. So, for example, if you hit 2 in the blue for 600 and then go and play Frolics, Frolics just eats money. That's pretty much what it does. It's a hard game, and you don't get very many replays for it. And it doesn't give you things very easily either. So it just seemed a bit odd to be able to do that. So I disabled that functionality, and instead I was still tracking every position of every unit, but it's only going to matter to me, pretty much. People who came up and played the game, likely weren't going to be wowed by the fact that, the game remembered the position of the magic squares when they left off playing. So instead, I converted every game to a static menu image that's pre-rendered with all the mechanical units inside of it. And that just sped things up in a ridiculous way. It is so fast now, which is great. The other thing that I manipulated was the odds animations. So I have talked ad nauseum, really, about coin flash animations and all the programming that went into those. There were 5 games where the odds animations overlapped in such a way that it rendered over top of the previous odds in the sequence. So, for example, if you look at a game like Variety, the odds are structured in such a way, the lamps themselves, so that if you were to draw a rectangle around the odds, you would see that the bounding box there bleeds into the odds position number 2 or number 3 or whichever odds position you're looking at. So what I had to do was figure out a way so that as it was rendered and it blanked out the odds, so as the odds sweep happens, it is rendering and then throwing away that render multiple times, and in some cases multiple times a second. So making sure that it didn't bleed over was actually more difficult than it seemed, until I realized that basically all I needed to do was brute force it. So what I did is rendered each individual bulb dynamically. And what I mean by that is, again, if you look at Variety's backglass, you'll see that you have sets of 3 odds. So for each position on the odds unit, you have your odds for 3 in a row, your odds for 4 in a row, and your odds for 5 in a row. And so my bounding box I made to encapsulate only one number in that set of 3. So all I'm doing is rendering 3 in a row and then throwing it away, 4 in a row, throwing it away, 5 in a row, throwing it away. And I'm doing all 3 of those at the same exact moment. So essentially it's invisible to the player. But also from the player's perspective, if you were to look at the way that it functioned previously and the way that it functions now, it's leaps and bounds ahead. It just looks so much more polished and nice. So I've done 4 out of 5 of the games. There's only Rio left. That's a United game. And then all of that tweaking is done. The other thing that I've done is gone back through, and there were a couple of bugs that were found at York. One position on the Miss America games did not pay, and I figured out why, and went through and re-implemented that for each of the games. It's very tricky in those games. My algorithm is such, I've described this before, but it's such that it expects there to be unique numbers in a sequence in order to count them. So if you have 2 and then 2, for example, in a row, it's going to throw away one of the 2s, expecting that it's got some junk data in there. So I have to kind of override it for Miss America or The Twist or any of those games where you can have 2 of the same number in a row. It's kind of an unusual situation, so it doesn't happen that frequently. And Miss America actually has quite a few of those. I think there are 4 or 5 scenarios where you can have 2 of the same number in line with itself. I really like the layout of those games. It is really fun to get a hit like that. It's so much different than just about any other game on planet Earth. So as part of that menu change that changed the dynamic nature of the various units within the game, I was forced to re-examine how the units were structured and how the game started them, just to make sure that they were as dynamic as needed to be, and I found a problem. The spotting disc and mixers did not actually rotate to random positions when you first enter the game. That was a mistake. They should have. This changes the portioning dramatically in many different ways, and it's much more like stepping up to a real game because you have no idea where those units are positioned, obviously, as the player, but it makes things much easier to achieve. There were some games where it would seemingly top out after a couple steps of the odds. You just feed it nickels forever. And no matter what I did to change the portioning, it didn't make a difference because those units weren't being spun randomly in the beginning. So when you first enter, if all the units are at position 0, it's going to take some time for them to randomize in such a way that you're going to get an award. Most people don't stick with the game long enough to do that. So anyway, this is a big difference. So if you've played it before and ran into a situation where you didn't get the thing that you thought you should have, now you should. So what else has been going on? Multi-races. I have done some work there. I wired up the Turf King Playfield for use in the game. I've got everything wired that needs to be wired there except for the proximity sensors, which I mentioned last time. So I'm going to take that and wire it to the P3 rock and the various switchboards and so forth, and then I'll be able to see how the code works within the game. So far everything fits pretty well. Again, this is a Turf King Playfield and a Victory Derby cabinet. So Victory Derby had a couple of interesting features which I thought were kind of cool. There are these 2 metal interior side walls which come off, and they're angled out in such a way that they prevent the ball from getting hung up. I thought it was just kind of a cool design. So I've left those in place. The other thing that they do is they center the playfield. So the playfield has to be absolutely in the center of the cabinet in order to lay down and be flat. I just think that's excellent. So that's what it's doing, and we'll see how that works. The wire bundle, it's a little troublesome. I wanted to run it down through the front right or front left of the game and then feed it through some Jones plugs. I think my plan might have changed because the Playfield wiring is a pretty large bundle and it needs to go across the ball's path at various points. So I'm going to do what I can to prevent that from being a problem. And one of the ways I can see to prevent issues is to make the Playfield slightly less modular and make it so that it plugs directly into the switch processing boards instead of into Jones plugs and then the switch processing boards. I don't necessarily prefer this approach because it'll be easy to damage the boards if I try to lift the Playfield out, for example, without unplugging it. But it will free up some space in the front of the cabinet, which I think is important, and it will just be easier to do and require less wire. So that's where I'm headed there. I'm not exactly sure if that's what I'm going to do or not yet, but I'm thinking on it. And Robo Frenzy, since the last time we talked, I wired up the 30-volt transformer and plugged it in, and the 30-volt subsystem just didn't work at all. And I took a look in the game, and I noticed that the 30-volt commons were tied to the 50-volt commons, were tied to the 6-volt commons, which is not right. So 30 and 6-volt were supposed to be on the same commons, and then 50-volt was supposed to be its own thing. So I moved all the commons over, except for the 50-volt, and what do you know? Plug it up, and boom! It blew the lamp fuse, the 6-volt fuse, really badly, like exploded that fuse. So I've got a super dead short somewhere, and I haven't had a chance to really dig into it much deeper than that, but hopefully this weekend I'll have a moment where I can take a look at that. I'm trying to move all of my projects forward just a little bit each week, if not more than a little bit, because there's a lot I'm in the middle of, and I feel that if I can make some progress on these, it'll make me feel better. So that's what I'm doing. Next episode, I hope to have some really good information for you about Robo Frenzy, some good news, rather. And if I'm lucky, I believe I need to order some connectors, but if I'm lucky, I'll have multi-races wired up as well. Multi-bingo should be in heavy testing rotation ahead of TPF, and I'm looking forward to having some local folks over to check it out and give me some feedback, as well as to point out any horrific bugs that I've managed to program in. So far, so good. I have done a lot of heavy-duty testing as I've been programming, but as with every other facet of that project, I've learned that once I test it in the cabinet itself, as opposed to on my development machines, I tend to shake out different bugs. So, we'll see. Well, let's talk about today's game. It is 1958's Bally Skill Parade. And Skill Parade is one of the skill series of games that Bally produced in the 50s, the most famous being Skill Roll. And in these games, you take a nickel and you are physically lofting it across the play area through various rollovers, and the rollovers award you different points or awards. Skill Parade is slightly different than Skill Roll. Skill Roll, you're earning points. Skill Parade operates similarly to a slot machine or some of the other upright games like it from the 50s and earlier, in that the nickel that you're flinging across the playfield is going to travel through one of several different rollovers, and these rollovers equate to an animal. The animal that you hit, you're trying to match through the entire sequence. So if you hit a monkey on your first roll, you want to hit a monkey on your second, and then a monkey on your third. If you do that, you get the best reward for the monkey. And there are different animals that equate to different rewards within the odds. So the lowest is 2 monkeys. Then you can get 3 monkeys, 2 or 3 jaguars, and if you get 2 jaguars, you can get an elephant, and that'll count as your third. 2 or 3 hippos, and if you get 2 hippos and an elephant, the elephant counts as your third. 2 lions or 3 lions, and if you get 2 lions, the elephant counts as your third. And best of all, if you get 3 elephants, you get the highest reward. So your odds go anywhere from 2 all the way up to 700. So for 2 monkeys, you get 2 replays. For 3 elephants, you can get up to 700. Now, one of the interesting things is on the final row, again, there are 3 different sets of 10 rollovers, which are arranged horizontally, and each of the sets of 10 is a point where the player controls where that nickel's going to fly. So in the first set of 10, you have 4 different rollovers which are dedicated to the monkey. Only 1 is the elephant. Only 1 is the lion, and everything else has 2. In the second set, 3 are dedicated to the monkey. Again, 1 to the elephant, 1 to the lion, 2 for everything else. But if you notice, there's 1 monkey different from the top row. So what did they replace it with in this middle row? The answer is a camel. And the camel, you might realize, doesn't actually help you with anything at all. So, unfortunately, if you hit that camel, your only chance of scoring at all is if you got 2 monkeys with your other 2 shots. The final row, and this one has a bit of a difference to the other rows, which we'll get into shortly. There are 3 monkeys, and there's 1 hippo, 1 lion, 1 elephant, 3 jaguars, and then 1 special rollover. Now, the special rollover always gives you a payout, no matter what. It can also be used in combination with the 2 monkeys. But as far as I'm aware, reading the score and instruction card, it only pays this separate set of odds. So those odds go from 1 to 7. So if you hit the special, you're guaranteed at least 1 replay, which is pretty cool. Now, the replays in this game work on a guaranteed basis. And what I mean by that, it's like a slot machine where you put in money and you're guaranteed that the odds will go up every time that you put in a quarter or a nickel or whatever denomination it uses. So in this game, you can put in up to a max of 7 coins or replays. This game, I believe, has the most appealing art package of any of the skill games. I say that, and I haven't talked about Skill Derby, which is another one that I'm really enamored with. But Skill Parade is just a really cool package altogether. It's a circus theme, and the circus is actually walking through town as you're rolling through. So you have clowns and cars and elephants and ladies on floats, and then ballerinas and a horse down in the foreground. I just think it's a really cool package altogether, and the game itself is very neat. I would love to play one of these. However, I've never seen one, so I hope to do that at some point in the future. Well, that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for listening. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line. That's 724-BINGOS1, 724-246-4671. You can listen to me on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter, at Bingo Podcast. You can follow me on Instagram, also at Bingo Podcast, or you can listen to me on my website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.